have security coming right now to trespass you from the property.
When returned to the property, can result in the same actions being taken upon you for trespassing.
You can't play blackjack here anymore.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of my life as an advantaged blackjack player. Once again, we will be visiting Las Vegas, where I'll be showing you some more POV sessions and interactions with casino surveillance. In my last video, I tried out Ellis Island, the Palms, and Orleans. I got a couple decent sessions in there, and I profited $3,125 for the day. Could have easily gone the other way, so it was nice to finish with some wins. For anyone new here, I am playing blackjack, and I'm using the high-low counting method to determine when I have an advantage and betting higher when I do. My bet spread is on the screen, and as you can see, I play from table minimum up to either one hand of 2,000 if I'm solo, or two hands of 1,200 if I'm playing with other people at the table. I also play using perfect basic strategy as well as some count-based deviations. I'm never guessing what the next move is. I follow these charts to a T for all my playing decisions. If you guys want to learn exactly what I'm doing, check out my How to Count Cards video. Link is in the description and it has everything you need to know. We will get right into it today, visiting a casino called Westgate, which is just off the strip. They have a 6-deck Hit 17 shoe game, which I was hoping to play and generate some EV. As per usual, the dealer asked for my ID to confirm my age. She checked it quickly and gave it back to me, so I figured I was in the clear. I started out with some minimum bets, but already phone calls were being made. Before too long, I was approached by some pit staff who had some bad news for me.
My name is Quinn Richards. I'm the casino shift manager. Just to let you know, we don't want you gambling in our casino. Okay, I have security coming right now to trespass you from the property.
Okay. I'll color that up.
So yeah, pretty quick back off here, and they were going as far as to trespass me because they didn't want me to try coming back. Off I went to the cage to cash my chips in. This place either had facial recognition or they had zoomed in on my ID when I gave it to the dealer. I've been backed off here before, and obviously they keep very good track of their records. I get people in the comments asking me if I eventually will just get trespassed everywhere, and how am I supposed to keep doing this if that happens. While that is somewhat of a concern in other areas of the US, getting trespassed isn't super common in my experience, and in Nevada specifically, they will expire after 2 years. So while yes, the trespasses can keep you from playing some games, there are still many games to play in the meantime. Finally, after some waiting in line, it was time to cash my chips out.
ID. They already know who I am. I'll just take the cash.
Make sure you're over 21. Thank you. Okay, thank you. This one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 67, 675.
Yeah, I hear you. I won't be back. Okay, no worries.
Now usually with a trespass, they'll just follow you to the door and make sure you leave the premises. All they have to do is verbally say that you're trespassed and you're no longer allowed on the property. If you return while trespassed, you will be subject to arrest. I'll get another crack at these guys in 2 years, but till then, I'm gonna have to stay away.
You being trespassing under the bags or stature 207.200 what states. If you do have to park the property, you have to be duly notified surveillance or to security. You face the result of a detainment for a misdemeanor, and your subsequent return to the property can result in the same actions being taken upon you for trespassing.
Okay. Do you mind if I wait here for my ride?
We'll keep an eye on you right there, but besides that, as long as you're leaving, that's all good.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
So after that display, I decided to head off strip to some of the less popular Vegas casinos. Many of these off-strip games are very high quality as they have good conditions in order to incentivize people to come to their casinos. Believe it or not, many regular gamblers care about game rules and conditions because they want to play what they consider a fair game. That's why you don't see 6-5 blackjack and continuous shufflers at every casino, and that's why it's probably going to stay that way for a very long time. The first place I headed to was a place called Durango. Here I was looking at a double-deck shoe game. Dealer hits soft 17, double after split is allowed, double on any first 2 cards is allowed, and you may resplit aces. However, there is no surrender. I started out here at the main floor and played a $50 minimum bet. As always, I started playing at minimum and waited for the count to go up. For anyone new here, I always skip through the negative counts, so let's fast forward to some higher bets. Quickly before we do that, I just want to say thank you all for the continued support. We just hit 20k subscribers recently, and as always, it's great to see the growth on the channel. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe, and don't be afraid to leave me some feedback. I read every comment. I also have some new perks available through Patreon or YouTube memberships. If you want to support me further, check them out. Now let's get into the action. We started off with an ID check right as I bought in. I handed it over, the pit boss checked my age and gave it back. It looked like we were in the clear for now. I started a new shoe and I played some negatives for a little bit until near the end where the count raised to a true 2. Since I wasn't the only player at the table, I was using my 2-hand spread and I put out 2 hands of 200. I was dealt a 12 and a 20 versus dealer's 10, and for all you OG viewers, you guys know how my 12s usually go. I hit expecting to get a 22 and bust, but amazingly I pulled a 9 for 21, so I stood on both hands. Dealer flipped a 10 for 20, so I pushed one and won the other. The count had now dropped below a true 1 and I was back to minimum bets. This was the only positive count in the whole shoe and we shuffled shortly after. The next shoe was also quite negative and we didn't get a positive count until right near the end. We hit a true 1, so I put out my 1 hand of 100. I was dealt a 19 versus dealer's 9. I stood and the dealer drew to 22, so this one was a win. I left out my $100 bet and was dealt a 17 versus dealer's ace. I didn't buy insurance as the count was below a true 3 and the dealer didn't have it. I had no option to surrender, so I stood and the dealer ended up drawing to 23, so this one was also a win. The count had now raised to a true 2, so out went my 2 hands of 200. I was dealt a 20 and a 4 versus dealer's 10. Of course I stood the 20 and I hit the 4 all the way into a 24, so that was a bust. Dealer flipped an 8 for 18, so at least my first hand won. That was the last hand of the shoe, and the table was now starting to fill up with some other players. Before I sat down at this table, I had done some recon and saw that there was another high quality game in the high limit room. I decided to color up and head over there in hopes of getting a quicker game. The faster the game, the more rounds per hour I get, and more rounds per hour means higher EV. There was only one person at this table in high limit as opposed to 3 other players on the main floor, meaning this game was over twice as fast. Even though there was a higher minimum bet of $100, the faster speed of the game meant it was actually worth more EV, so of course I sat down here. I sat around for a minute until the current shoe finished up and hopped in on the next one. Since the minimum bet was now $100, I'll generally just show counts of true 2 or above because that will be my first betting increase from table minimum. I'm going to make an exception for this first hand because it shows you just how quickly the count can raise on these double deck games. This was the first hand of the shoe, so the running count is currently 0. The player beside me was dealt an 8 and a 4, so that brings our running count up to 1. I was dealt a 6 and a 5, so running count is now 3. Dealer is showing a 5 for a running count of 4. Cards valued 2 through 6 are called low cards and are worth +1 in the high-low count system. That's why I'm adding to the running total. I doubled and received a 6 for a running count of 5. Dealer flipped a 6 and then a 7 for a total running count of +6 after this first hand. Not a single face card was dealt to the table this hand, and instantly we were playing at an advantage. There were still 2 decks remaining to be dealt, so I divided my running count of 6 by 2 and was left with a true count of 3. That means it was time for 2 hands of 300. This is a great real-time example of the high-low counting system in action, and if you guys want to learn all about it, check out my How to Count Cards video. It goes into depth on all of this. So anyways, like I said, we were at a true 3, and I put out my 2 hands of 300. I was dealt a 16 and a 20 versus dealer's 10. I couldn't surrender my 16, so I stood on it, which is a deviation that occurs in any positive count versus a dealer's 10. I also stood my 20, and the dealer flipped a 9 for 19, so I lost one hand and won the other. The running count was now down to 3, which means a true count of 1, so I will show this next bet of $100. I was dealt a 20 versus dealer's ace. I didn't buy insurance and stood. Dealer drew to 19, so this hand was a win. The count had now raised to a true 2, so out went my 2 hands of 200. I was dealt an 18 and a 19 versus dealer's 4, and I stood on both. Dealer ended up drawing to 18, so I was paid on one hand and pushed the other. After this hand, the count went negative for a little while, right up until the very end of the shoe when it skyrocketed to a true 6. I had to buy in to fund my 2 hands of $1,000, and this definitely got some attention. I put him out there and was dealt 2 hands of 20 versus a dealer's 2. I was feeling pretty confident that I'd win these 2 hands. So yeah, the dealer drew to 20, meaning both hands pushed, which is better than losing, but is still very lame, so I wasn't feeling very happy about that. Count was now down to a true 4, so I lowered my bet to 2 hands of 500. I was dealt a soft 13 and a pair of aces versus dealer's 10. I turned my soft 13 into a 23, so that was no good. I split the aces, turning them into a hand of 21 and 17. Dealer flipped a 10 for 20, so I lost one hand of the split and won the other. That was the last hand of the shoe, so we shuffled up and I was back to minimum bets. The count must have been true 1 here because I doubled my 9 against a dealer's 2, which is a deviation that occurs at a true 1. Dealer ended up busting, so my double was paid. The count had now raised to a true 3, and out went my 2 hands of 300. I was dealt a 16 and a 14 versus dealer's ace, which is quite garbage. Here's a situation I've ran into a few times in my videos and you guys have left comments about. Yes, the count was true 3 when I placed the bets, and yes, on screen it says true 3 right now, but if you look at the cards on the table, you'll see the running count has dropped, which means we are no longer at a true 3. Therefore, I'm not going to buy insurance. Technically, insurance is profitable at a true 2.5 in double deck, but the count wasn't there, so I didn't buy it. Luckily, the dealer didn't have it, but unluckily, I busted both my hands and lost my $600. Aww. The count dipped down and I was back to minimum bets for a few hands until it recovered to a true 2. I put out my 2 hands of 200 and was dealt a blackjack and a soft 17 versus a dealer's 8. The blackjack was paid out and I proceeded to turn the soft 17 into a 24, so that was a bust. That was the last positive hand of the shoe. We played one more hand before shuffling and getting into a new one. Before long, the count started to go up and we hit a true 3. I put out my 2 hands of 300 and was dealt a 17 and a 20 versus dealer's 10. I stood on both and was hoping for the dealer bust. Unfortunately, the dealer had 20, so I pushed one hand and lost the other. After this, I played several hands at table minimum until the last hand of the shoe, where the count jumped up to a true 4. This means I was raising my bet to 2 hands of 500. I'll let this hand play out in real time for you guys with no commentary.
I'll take one of those too.
One more like that?
Wow. Sir. Can't put it like that. Okay.
So as you just saw, it was a great last hand. I was dealt a 16 and a 20 versus dealer 7. I hit the 16 into a 21 and both hands ended up winning. That was the last hand I'd get to play here as they backed me off right after, so I was on to the next spot. My total session here was 33 minutes, my average hourly EV was $902, and my total session profit was $125. My next spot was a casino called Red Rock. They're owned by the same company as Durango, and they have an identical double deck game. Since I just got backed off at one of their sister properties, I was expecting a quick back off, but you never know what's going to happen, so it's always worth checking. I got in there and sat down, bought in, and started playing some minimum bets. There was no ID check this time, but phone calls were being made and it was obvious I wasn't going to last here. Eventually the count went up to a true 1, so I got a $100 bet out. I was dealt a 15 versus dealer's 3, which I stood on, and the dealer drew to 20, so this hand was a loss.
I'll just go.
As expected, I got the back off very quickly this time because I just hit their sister property beforehand. I know some of you are probably typing in the comments right now wondering why I would even go here right after hitting a sister property, and that's a fair question. I was trying to do all these off-strip casinos in one go because I only had a few days here in Vegas and I wasn't the only one who needed to use the rental car. So even if the back-offs were quick, I was still going to hit these properties back to back and hope to catch a shift sleeping. I played for a total of 3 minutes here. The EV can't even be calculated on such a short session, so I'm just going to call it 0, and I left with a loss of $125. My next spot was a casino called Suncoast. They offer a very similar game to the station properties, with all the game rules being identical. I got in there, bought in, and started playing. They did ask for my ID here, so I had no choice but to hand it over if I wanted to play. After they checked it, I was allowed to start playing. I played 2 entire shoes in the negative until finally the count hit a true 2, so I raised my bet from table minimum to 2 hands of 200.
You can't play blackjack here anymore.
Once again, another quick back off. This session was actually negative EV because I didn't get to place any bets in a positive count, which sucks. All in all, my session was 7 minutes and I lost $100. Nothing to do but move on to the next one. Which brings us to Rampart. This is another off-strip casino with an identical game to Suncoast. It has the exact same rules and deck penetration. The communication between the casino surveillance was very good today, so I wasn't expecting to get much time here. There was no ID check here and I was allowed to just start playing. The count immediately began to rise on the first shoe and we hit a true 1. I put out my $100 bet and was dealt a 17 versus dealer's 10. I stood and the dealer drew to 19, so this one was a bust. My bet stayed out and I was dealt a 16 versus 10. Since we were in a positive count, I stood, but it was no use as the dealer had a 10 underneath. After this, I played a hand at minimum bet, and that was just enough to get the count up to a true 2. Since I wasn't playing solo, I put out 2 hands of 200. I was dealt 2 20s versus a dealer's 10, and of course I stood on both. The dealer flipped a 9 for 19, so both hands were paid. The count had now dipped back into the negatives for 1 hand, so I dropped down to minimum bet. After this hand, the person playing beside me dropped out of the game, so I was now playing solo, which is great because the next hand saw the count raise to a true 2. I was back to my 1-hand spread, so I put out a hand of 200 and was dealt a 6 versus dealer's 9. I drew to 16 and stood, but ultimately the dealer drew to 20, so this one was a loss. 16 will stand against 9 at a true count of 4 or higher for anyone wondering why I did that. All those low cards brought the count up to a true 6, which means it was time for a big bet. I had to buy in several hundred to fund this next hand of $1,500, and after that was all finished up, I put it out there. I was dealt a soft 19 versus dealer 6, which means I was pulling out even more cash to double this hand. All of a sudden, this became a $3,000 hand, and I was hoping for something great. At this point, the pit boss was definitely taking notice of me.
You have ID, sir?
Yeah.
After I handed over my ID, the pit boss stopped the play for almost 2 whole minutes as she took it over to her counter and called it in. I knew this was very likely going to be my last hand, so I was really hoping to win this one. Finally, she returned my ID and we got back into the action. The dealer dealt my double card, played out their hand, and boom! Dealer drew to 25, meaning I had just won this $3,000 hand. Always feels nice because I easily could have been rug pulled here. Especially when we see that my double had turned my hand into a 13, meaning there was so many ways I could have just lost. But it worked out this time, so I can't complain at all. After I was paid out, the count had risen to a true 7, and I tried to put out another bet of $2,000.
What color?
So yeah, as soon as I tried to place another big bet, she called for a shuffle and then backed me off. It's a shame I missed out on that true 7 bet because it was a very advantageous situation for me. I was leaving with a profit, but it still stings to get backed off in a very high count like that. While this was another short session, it was very profitable. All in all, I played a whopping 6 minutes, my hourly EV was $950, and my total profit was $2,925. A nice short-term win, but it would have been nice to sit there a little while longer and generate some more EV. I'm going to cut the video off here for today, and thank you guys so much for watching. In the time I've been editing this video, we've surpassed 30,000 subscribers, and that's just so awesome to see, so thank you guys so much. As always, more videos to come. I still have lots of Vegas footage as well as a whole month-long US trip I did, so there's enough footage to make videos for forever it seems. If you're new, once again, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and as always, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.